All right, what's going on, guys? 30 minutes of Aztec talk with you following last night's impressive shutout win over Stony Brook. Kind of a special edition of the Aztec wrap-up show. Haven't done these as often as I'd like to over the last year in calling these games, but we'll be doing these wrap-up shows as often as I can here throughout 2025, and do want to react to everything that we saw yesterday again at Snapdragon Stadium as the Aztecs take down Stony Brook, and they do so impressively, start to finish, right, dominating time of possession, and really winning in all facets, whether it was offense, defense, or special teams. San Diego State impressive in that win on Thursday night. So if you're new to the channel, whether you're here live or on replay, we have year-round content for Aztec fans. We talk a lot of Pac-12, the future of San Diego State athletics as well. So please subscribe to this channel because we have coverage for you, whether it's interviews that have been done elsewhere or live shows like this. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, smash the like button for me. You can follow me on X at John Schaefer. All right, so again, Aztecs, if you missed it yesterday, win 42-0 in Jayden Denegal's first college start, obviously the Michigan transfer. And Denegal yesterday was, in my opinion, very impressive. I mean, the takeaway was that Denegal can certainly run this offense. Now, one of the concerns was he left the game early on, appeared to be clutching in his shoulder, returned, and then the game eventually got out of reach and didn't play again in the final quarter or so of the game. I think Sean Lewis was asked about this postgame. I was watching something as I was falling asleep last night, his postgame commentary. It appears as if, and I don't have any specific knowledge on it, and I'm not a doctor, and I haven't talked to any training staff, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it appeared as if hopefully Denegal is going to be okay because, again, he returned to the game. So that's the good news, obviously, if you're a San Diego State fan. The other good news is the way he conducted himself running this offense, whether it was the first two drives of the game with impressive long scoring drives. You go back to that first drive of the game. I think it took 9 minutes off the clock, 9.5 minutes. That was a combination of Denegal and Bert Emanuel Jr. Again, Denegal 3 or 4 plays in, appears to suffer some type of tweak, upper body situation. He comes off. Bert Emanuel comes in, leads the offense down the field. Denegal returns on that drive, and the Aztecs punch it in behind Lucky Sutton. Then the defense gets to stop. They get the ball back, and they score in their second drive. And that was that impressive throw from Denegal over the middle to Jacob Bostic when Denegal had drawn Stony Brook offside. So it was one of those games where they did everything that you wanted them to do early because they scored in the first quarter, and they scored multiple times in the first quarter. We actually touched on this on the broadcast last night. San Diego State a year ago, and this is kind of a crazy stat, didn't score on their first possession of a game until the final game of the regular season when they did it against Air Force. So, and Sean Lewis had talked about it a little bit this week and in the offseason about this intentionality of starting faster. And we saw that, and I understand it. It's an FCS opponent, and this isn't the best team they're going to play this year. And there'll be more challenges ahead, obviously. But you can only play the team that's on your schedule. And Stony Brook, had a good year last year, a very good year. 8-4, preseason ranked in FCS. At one point last year, they were 8-2. This was a little different than the game that the Aztecs opened with last year when they took on Texas A&M Commerce, because Commerce had a bad year the year before in 2023. So San Diego State, again, playing a team that had success last year in the CAA, going 8-4 overall. And all you can do is outplay your opponent, and that's what the Aztecs did, whether it was the offense, again, building a 20-0 lead at the half. The defense, I don't think you can play better over 60 minutes than the Aztecs defense did, as they held Stony Brook to under 100 yards. Under 100 yards of total offense in the game on, I think it was less than 2 yards per play. Yeah, it was. I think it was 1.9 or 1.95 yards per play. Stony Brook, who had an All-American running back in Roland Dempster, couldn't get the ground game going. They had just 49 rushing yards on 27 attempts. They had just 46 passing yards in this game as well. Meanwhile, San Diego State was really balanced on offense. Mentioned the fact that Denegal threw it effectively. Bert Emanuel came on in relief, and also in that first drive, he was effective in the zone read game. He was 3 of 4 through the air. Obviously, Lucky Sutton was a story, but so were the other tailbacks that saw action, whether it was Byron Cardwell Jr., Christian Washington, that trio of San Diegans. We saw Sincere Rainey late in the game as well. The receivers, I think they spread the ball out to 7, 8, 9 different receivers, right? We've heard so much about Jordan Napier, but it was more than just Napier. We saw Mikey Welsh, who earned a scholarship in the last couple of weeks. We saw a big play again to Bostic. We saw a big play down the right sideline to Donovan Brown on a really good throw from Jayden Denegal. I think that went for 44 yards. So you saw a lot, I think, overall. And then special teams is really good. I thought Jordan Napier in the return game was excellent. Gabe Placencia was the preseason special teams player of the year after, I think, making 13 of 14 field goals a season ago, and he was 2 for 2 in this game. So it's kind of hard to complain, right? I mean, you know that it's only – the caveat is it's an FCS opponent, but it's kind of hard to complain when you win a game 42-0, which is what they did. Just a year ago, the Aztecs, trailed at the half in their opening game against Texas A&M Commerce. Now, they poured it on in the second half. They scored 6 touchdowns in that second half, and I think they won going away, whatever the final score was, 45. I don't even know. You could put it in the chat if you remember the score last year, 45-10, 45-14, something like that, 45-13, whatever it was. They won going away. This was different. This was more decisive. This was more, from start to finish, wire to wire, so to speak, in the shutout victory over Stony Brook. And I think it leaves people obviously encouraged. And now we'll see if they can do something comparable, not in terms of the domination of a game or the end result in terms of winning by 42 points, but can they take this show on the road and can they do it in the step up in competition? Remember a year ago when they played Washington State here in San Diego, it was a very good game. The Aztecs had control. It felt like, midway through that third quarter, game flipped. At the time, Washington State had basically a Heisman candidate potentially this year in John Mateer. He's transferred to Oklahoma. And the Aztecs, had a game that they certainly felt like when they came out of it, they probably should have won, but they couldn't secure that win. It was a huge swing game a year ago for San Diego State. They were 3-3 at home, taking on Washington State. They led by 11 or 12 in the second half. They ended up losing the game 29-26, and they wouldn't win again in the back half of the regular season. They lost their last 6 games of the regular season last year. Now they get another opportunity against a Washington State team that's got a brand new coaching staff. They've had a slew of changes. So have most teams, by the way. And they haven't even played yet. They're going to play a nearby neighbor, the University of Idaho. They're separated by 10 or 20 miles, Eastern Washington, Western Idaho. They'll play on Saturday night in Pullman. The Aztecs have the advantage of the extra rest day or two as they get ready for Washington State. None of it's going to be easy, obviously. You're going to the road. You're playing in Pullman. The environment itself is a challenge. Playing on the road in college football is a challenge. It'll be Jayden Denegal's first road start. I'm sure it'll be a good enough atmosphere. But some of the things that they did yesterday hopefully travel, so to speak, and that's establishing that ground game. They go for over 200 yards. I talked about Sutton, who kind of waited his turn behind Marquez Cooper last year. I mean, this is his 4th year in the program. Saw some time as a freshman, then was more of an understudy, right, for a couple of years, and now has the opportunity to start. He took full advantage, I thought, yesterday. He was basically the first half bell cow. He had something like 17 carries in the first half. He ended up going for 100 yards. He got into the end zone not once, but 2 times in the game. But what travels is the formula that the Aztecs have used for years, which is if you can run it for 200 yards, you're going to win more often than not. I think they're 58-2 now in their last 60 games where they've rushed for 200 or more yards. In addition to that, it was ball control, which is something we saw a lot under Brady and Rocky. They played with tempo, but it didn't feel as if they were rushed yesterday, right? Like they played with a good tempo, but it felt like they were under control. And that's where I credit Sean Lewis, Jayden Denegal, Bert Emanuel. You've got these veteran quarterbacks. They don't have a ton of playing experience, obviously, at this level. But I think, waiting in the wings, so to speak, probably put them in this position where they could have success from the get-go. And, even a year ago in the opener, the Aztecs committed 16 penalties in their opener. San Diego State was one of the most penalized teams in America last year. They had 16 penalties again against Texas A&M Commerce a year ago, and they averaged over 9 penalties per game. Yesterday, they were cleaner. They weren't clean. They weren't perfectly clean. I'm sure there's things they want to work on. There were a couple of personal fouls, 15-yard penalties in the second half. Sean Lewis huddled the entire team up, I think, to talk about that at some point in the late third quarter. But 7 overall penalties, where a year ago you had 16 in the first game. And a year ago you probably had, 6, 8, 10 procedural penalties in that first game against Texas A&M Commerce. That was not the case yesterday. You had maybe 1 or 2 false starts, right? You had 1 or 2 defensive holdings, and then you had those 2 personal fouls. But that was basically the extent of the penalties. You're never going to cut down on all of them, right? You're not going to go from averaging 9 penalties a game to averaging 1. But if you can go from 9 penalties a game down to something like 6, I mean, that's a big difference. Sean touched on this postgame yesterday, said, listen, nobody's worth a 15-yard penalty. And that's the difference between winning and losing. And he was trying to make that point, I think, clear to his team. While they were going to win the game, I think when he brought the team together, they were up 28-0 or 35-0. But the point was, that it can be costly moving forward, right? Like you can't have that type of penalty. You can't give a team 15 yards. You can't give a team an extra first down. I was watching yesterday, Boise State, USF. Boise State, I think, scored the first touchdown. They led 7-0. Later in the first half, they led 7-3. They had USF backed up and sacked their quarterback on like a 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 20. And the defensive end kind of just at the last moment after the whistle blew, he slung the quarterback down to the turf. Flag came out 15 yards. So as opposed to like USF punting on 4th and 25, they ended up getting a first down. They would capitalize and score a touchdown on that drive and take a lead and then never relinquish the lead the rest of the way on their way to that blowout win. That was only one play. USF may have won the game regardless, but it was a huge swing early in that game that gave USF momentum. And you can imagine, again, San Diego State last year was in a lot of close games. The difference was, one play, one penalty, one drive, one moment. And it's something where they're going to have to be very cognizant of it moving forward, whether it's Washington State on Saturday night or whether it's a couple of weeks from now when they get back home and take on Cal at Snapdragon Stadium. The margins in these games are going to be thin. I think San Diego State's roster is vastly improved. They fancy themselves as a team that's capable of winning, 6+ games, potentially vying in the Mountain West. In order to do that, you need to be good on the margins, right? You need to take care of the football, something they did yesterday. You need to limit penalties, something they did by and large yesterday. You need to run the football, and that's what they did as well yesterday. But when you don't turn the football over, when the penalties are down, when you run for 200 yards, it's a good combination. Now, again, was it perfect? No, of course not. It's an opener. There were some throws I'm sure they wish they had back. There were some balls that could have been intercepted by Stony Brook that San Diego State was pretty fortunate that didn't happen. But all in all, I think an impressive performance overall by San Diego State. And I don't even know where you start. You say, well, look, the offense was vastly improved and the offensive line was bigger and stronger. Or is it the defense? I mean, the defense, the fact that they were only on the field for just over 20 minutes and the fact that Stony Brook only ran they didn't even run 50 plays in this game. Let me see how many plays they ran. I think they ran something like 46 or 47 total plays in the game. They only had 6 first downs. So the defense couldn't be more rested. Shoot, you got your second and third string players in late in the third quarter or early in the fourth quarter. So you got players like, Trey White maybe playing something like 40 snaps in that game. And now because you're playing the Thursday and you don't play until the next Saturday, you've got almost like a mini bye a little bit in there as well. And then in addition to that, after the Washington State game, you have a full bye because you have 2 weeks between the Cougars and then the Cal, Bears coming here on September 20th. So I think it sets up nicely early in the season to continue to work on yourself. And by the time you really get into the meat and the potatoes of the schedule, you're probably 4 or 5 weeks into the year because of the way the schedule shakes out for the Aztecs. They have 2 byes in the first half of the year. And then down the stretch, they'll play 6 consecutive games. That's something they had last year as well. They played those 6 consecutive games late. That's a challenge, especially when you have 2 byes in a season. Not every calendar year has 2 byes, but currently in college football this year, there are once again 2 byes like last year. You'd probably prefer, you play 3 or 4 games, have a bye. You play 4+ games, you have a bye, and then you finish maybe with 4 in a row, maybe 5. But this year they're going to finish with 6. There's some trickiness in there. There's a game where they play at Northern Illinois and then they come back and play on a Friday. There's the game at Hawaii and they come back and play Boise State the following week. So the schedule will kind of stiffen, so to speak, in terms of like not having as much prep time. But the first 3 or 4 games of the season, you kind of have what you need. You have these 8 or 9 days between Stony Brook and Washington State. You have 14 days between Washington State and Cal. After Cal, you're coming off a bye again the week before, and you go to Northern Illinois. I think those first 4 weeks are very manageable. It gets more challenging when you open conference play on a Friday night. I think it's a Friday night against Colorado State after that Northern Illinois game in the Midwest. But again, I like the Thursday opener, especially on the other side of it, coming off a win. Would love to get your thoughts on the win, whether you're here live or if you're here on replay. If you want to put your comments in the comment section down below. If you're here live right now, if you want to share your comments in the live chat, I'd be happy to react to them. But, considering what the expectations are, considering the length of the offseason, you're 220-something days between games. The Aztecs didn't make a bowl game. You have the sour taste in your mouth to end 2024. San Diego State losing 6 consecutive games. We thought retaining pieces was going to be critical, and I thought it was yesterday. with all the defensive starters back. I thought the secondary was outstanding. They were basically untested in that game. The rush got after Stony Brook enough. They brought in a transfer from FAU, August Salvati. He had a couple of sacks in the game. I think technically 1.5 sacks, 1.5 tackles for loss as well. Trey White, he wasn't fully neutralized, but he drew so much attention that he gave others opportunities. I thought Tano Latuli and Owen Chambliss were terrific, the linebackers for San Diego State. And I thought it was an all-facets win. It's one thing to say, you know what, they scored 40-something points, but they allowed 30. Or they won the game and they shut someone out, but they only won 13-0. Or, they won the game, but on special teams, they had a couple of miscues. No, I mean, the kicking game was excellent with Placencia. The punting game was ridiculous. So Hunter Green, I think he averaged 55 yards per punt yesterday. Here's another guy that could be an NFL punter coming out of San Diego State. And all in all, a good night. I was concerned about the weather heading in. It was raining throughout the course of the day. The rain ended up not being a factor last night. Obviously, the skies cleared. It was hot and humid, but the weather really wasn't a factor. There were a couple of balls that were on the turf there in the center quarterback exchange in the shotgun, but the Aztecs didn't lose possession on any of them. There were a couple of throws I'm sure that the quarterbacks might want to have back, but that's going to happen, isn't it? I mean, it's a first game kind of for everyone. So you have those first game jitters. And Lucky Sutton, I mean, how could you not feel great for Lucky Sutton and all these tailbacks, really, who have established this bond. They've known each other for forever. They've played at local high schools. This is such a great area, obviously, for high school football. You have so many San Diegans on this roster. I forget the exact number, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 that played their high school football in the county. I mean, that's an unbelievable number for any Division I program anywhere in the country to have that many players in the same county as the school. And you got a lot of these guys on the field right now with so much pride in this program, guys like Trey White and Lucky Sutton and these other tailbacks that we've talked about and many others as well. And then for Jayden Denegal, who spent 3 years at Michigan and got on the field a little bit in 2023 when they went undefeated and won that national championship. For him to have a night like last night, I'm sure it feels really good because he's been waiting for this opportunity. As a kid out of Southern California, he grew up a couple of hours, up near LA, and comes down here and gets an opportunity to start and takes advantage of it. Here's the other thing. I haven't touched a lot on it. Bert Emanuel Jr., I give him a lot of credit for coming in relief like he did on that first drive and moving the sticks with him out there. And then the way he performed in that fourth quarter, they really can run some good offense through Bert Emanuel Jr. With the large lead, they weren't going to, sling it around all night in the fourth quarter. But that zone read with his athleticism, that mesh play, those mesh plays with Bert Emanuel Jr., I think can really pay off. And then the question becomes, like, as you evolve your offense as well, how do you get Emanuel involved offensively, even if Denegal is at quarterback? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if he'll be on the bench because you're only one play away if there's an injury. Or will they implement him as a decoy potentially? Will he be in the backfield? Will he be in the slot? Will he have a package of plays? Will they run Wildcat with Bert Emanuel Jr.? I think there's a lot of possibilities. And the fact that San Diego State didn't show that in game one, I think is really encouraging. You probably don't want to put it on tape in front of Washington State because you could implement, 1, 3, 5 plays that are designed solely for Bert Emanuel Jr. that you don't currently have on film. And I think that could be a pretty big benefit for the Aztecs. And I think San Diego State, showed enough on film that, again, makes Washington State have to think about it, right? They had a 2-point conversion, right, that they used last night where they left their offense on the field. They did a couple of things. They did like a double reverse, throw back to the quarterback for a completion down the left sideline with Emanuel, I think, in the second half. I think that was Emanuel in the second half. So I think they showed enough where Washington State has to be aware of it. But in addition to that, though, they didn't open up the playbook, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't show everything, which I think is encouraging. It's not that they were vanilla, but they also didn't use every bell and whistle possible in game one, because you don't want to do that. I mean, you want to have the element of surprise as well as you head into, arguably some of your more challenging games of the year. I mean, Washington State and Cal coming up, and then, you'll get into Mountain West play not far after that. But all in all, really good start for San Diego State, beating Stony Brook again, 42-0. We'll talk way more about it, by the way, today on John and Jim. I'll have J.R. Tolliver, the Aztec for life, the outstanding receiver. He's going to join us coming up at 2:30 today. So J.R. Tolliver will be on the show. We'll talk more about the Aztecs win, and then we'll look ahead as well to week 2 coming up against Washington State next Saturday night at 7:15, a game you can hear on San Diego Sports 760, a game that's going to be televised on the CW, a night game in Pullman on the Palouse. All right, let me get to some of your comments. If you guys want to weigh in, we probably have another 10 minutes or so. So if you want to weigh in the live chat, just put your comments in the live chat. I'll try to get to as many as I can. And in addition to that, if you wouldn't mind just subscribing to the channel, a bit of a passion project. So please subscribe. We've got a couple thousand subscribers over the course of the last year or two. We try to bring you, again, interviews, live shows like this. So please subscribe to this channel if you're an Aztec or a Pac-12 or Mountain West football fan. Let me get to this from Andrew. Appreciate you, Andrew. Thanks for being here. He says, do you think if the Aztecs get a win against either Wazoo or Cal, they will be able to reach a bowl game? I love this question. I really do think that this upcoming game against Washington State is of particular significance, and let me explain the reason as to why. First of all, it's not going to be easy, but secondly, it is an opportunity, and you feel like based on what we saw yesterday and what the expectations are this year and what the team is thinking internally, they're expecting to go up there, compete, and hopefully win that game. Why it would be so significant is it's kind of that marquee opportunity for this second coaching staff and for these players, right? And it's also a chance to avenge something that happened last year, although I don't think it's solely about that, because that was a year ago and you've had changes on both sides, obviously, since last year. But let's just go down the path where San Diego State comes out of Pullman with a hard-fought win. Now, all of a sudden, just like that, in the snap of a finger, you're 2-0 into a bye week, hosting Cal on a Saturday night at Snapdragon Stadium, honoring the 2015 Mountain West Championship team. Like, imagine that environment and the level of enthusiasm from the fan base that would come out of just that. Just going to Pullman, I say just, right? Easier said than done. I'm not the coaching staff. But going to Pullman, coming out of there with a win against that, new look Cougars team with a new coaching staff, they have expectations too. But if you can go there, play well, leave with a win, you're 2-0. That's the Delmar train, by the way. You're 2-0, and then you have a bye week to prepare for Cal, and you get Cal at home. I think the enthusiasm would be pretty significantly high heading into that game for San Diego State fans. I think the environment would be very good, and I think that would be a game that, imagine that. Now you get Cal at home, and if you play well in that game, you really start putting some of those pieces together if that were to transpire. Now, again, they have to do it. They have to go out and win at Washington State, or they have to go out and win at home against Cal. But I really think that Washington State game, I think you win that game, you have a level of buzz just by doing that, just by starting 2-0. And I think absolutely if you can do that, if you can beat Washington State, of course, the expectation is a bowl game. I think if you can split these two games, your expectation is a bowl game. And to be honest with you, I think regardless of result, they envision 6+ wins this year. I really think that that's, what they're aiming for. I think the goals are probably higher than that, truthfully. Had J.D. Wicker on the radio earlier this week, San Diego State's longtime athletic director. He said at San Diego State, we compete for championships, and the proof's in the pudding. They have. Nobody's won more Mountain West championships across all sports in the history of the league than San Diego State. And of course, the football team would be included in that as well. So big early season opportunities. And again, it's just a math equation. In order to get to 6, you stack up a couple early, you give yourself some wiggle room a little later. And getting one of the next 2, yes, critically important to getting to that number. And truthfully, if you get one of the next 2, you start thinking about not just getting to 6, but potentially getting beyond that as well. Mikey, appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for weighing in. He says, certainly feel more optimistic about the season after last night as opposed to A&M Commerce last year. I think that's a take that I've heard from a few people, Mikey, whether it's been on social media or even in listening to like our post-game coverage last night with Ben Fletcher on San Diego Sports 760. I think last year was all new. We didn't truly know what to expect, although there were expectations. We knew that the Aztecs were starting the year with a true freshman quarterback. I thought that game, there was excitement, but it didn't come until the second half. And I think the takeaways from that game were we probably didn't have a great feel for what we had just seen. Defense had made some plays. The offense made some big plays late. You were taking on an FCS team that, with all due respect, wasn't coming off the same type of success as Stony Brook had in 2024. Like, Stony Brook has high expectations. They're picked to finish like 3rd or 4th in the Coastal Athletic Association, which is a really good FCS league. They were 8-2 last year before they lost their last 2 games, and they lost them in like heartbreaking fashion. They were a win away from the FCS playoffs. And as I've told a lot of people, and I've seen some of the comments like, well, they beat a high school team last night. It's not the case, because every FBS team in the country, I think other than either one or two, maybe a Notre Dame or SC, someone could look it up, but you have 130 FBS teams playing FCS teams. And this, I promise you, FCS teams, multiple, will beat FBS teams this year. And some of those will happen this weekend. There will be an FCS team that beats an FBS team this week, and you just don't want it to be you. It happened to the Aztecs in 2013 or 2014 when they lost to Jimmy Garoppolo in Eastern Illinois. Sean Lewis is on that coaching staff. He was the receivers coach for Eastern Illinois. That game was at the Q, and the Aztecs lost that game. Or go back to like 2019 when San Diego State had a good year under Rocky Long. They won their FCS game 6-0 against Weber State in a game that they easily could have lost. So you can only play who's on your schedule. Every FBS team will play an FCS team, including San Diego State. And the Aztecs did not play some team that went 0-11 in the FCS last year. They played a team that went 8-4 that has aspirations for probably getting to the FCS postseason in 2025. And we'll see how good they are in Stony Brook. But, I mean, they completely neutralized them from the get-go. And that's still a credit to San Diego State, regardless of opponent, because we talk about all the time, you can play up or you can play down. They didn't really play to their opponent. They played to their standard. And that's what, to me, was probably most, one of the bigger takeaways from yesterday for San Diego State. Brent wants to know where I got my hat. This is from Smashing Designs, a young woman that I think has a cap company. She sells a lot of like Padre designs. She has some Aztec designs as well. I think she's online. She's on Instagram. So just Google Smashing Designs. She's probably got like 40 or 50 different styles of caps. I have 2 of them. And yeah, she has some really good designs and really good caps. So make sure to check her out. Again, Smashing Designs. But yeah, I think that one of the primary takeaways is the point that Andrew made. The fan base expects San Diego State to get to a bowl game. The Aztecs were bowl eligible, I think, for 14 consecutive years, something like that, right? 13 or 14 consecutive years until just the last couple of years where you had the coaching change. And then you had last year where it started 3-3. They led Washington State at home. It looked as if they were about to get to 4-3 with their first marquee win under Sean Lewis. The game slipped away. They lost 29-26. They didn't win again all year. Now can you capitalize on opportunities to begin 2025, whether it's at Pullman on Saturday night or at home against Cal 2 weeks from Saturday night? And then, it doesn't lighten up from there. I think the Northern Illinois game on the road is obviously a tricky one. Northern Illinois gave Notre Dame its only loss last year until the national championship game when Notre Dame lost to Ohio State. Like, consider that. The only Notre Dame loss last year came in South Bend to Northern Illinois last year in something like week 1 or week 2. Great point, Brent. Yeah, I thought the students last night were terrific. San Diego State students always turn out. So the student section was in full display. And again, I think that you're basically a win away from having a really good atmosphere at Snapdragon Stadium on September 20th for that night game against Cal, when you're honoring a terrific San Diego State team 10 years after winning a Mountain West championship, having all those players. Rocky Long will be back. DJ Pumphrey, the nation's all-time career-leading rusher, right? It's going to be there on that night as well. So, like, you're only a win away from that. I think either way, that's going to be a good atmosphere. I think you'll have a good amount of people in the stands on September 20th. But you win in Pullman, and then you have a whole extra week to prepare and get people, thinking more about it and enthused about what's to come. And the way college football works is like you're judged by wins and losses. There's so few games. I mean, the margins are thin. The difference between 6 wins and 5 wins is a bowl game or not, or the difference between 9 wins or 10 wins. I mean, it comes down to one additional win. Take advantage of one additional game. We'll see if the Aztecs can do that next Saturday night in Pullman, Washington. All right, much more in this game coming up today on John and Jim. Again, J.R. Tolver, the Aztec for Life, who was on the TV call yesterday on KUSI. He's going to join us at 2:30. We'll have full reaction on John and Jim. Again, Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. And then, of course, we'll have the call for you on San Diego Sports 760 a week from Saturday night when the Aztecs take to the road for the first time this year. They're going to play at Washington State next Saturday night at 7:15, a game you can hear on San Diego Sports 760 and watch on the CW. Again, if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. We have year-round content for Aztec football, basketball, and more fans. So make sure to subscribe to this channel. Please smash the like button for me, and you can follow me on X at John Schaefer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. We will see you this afternoon on the radio beginning at 2 p.m. Much more coverage for Aztec fans. And again, J.R. Tolver will be on the show as the Aztecs beat Stony Brook on a Thursday night at Snapdragon Stadium 42-0. My name is John Schaefer, and this has been the Wrap-Up Show. Thanks, guys.